Recording. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all well. Thank you for joining me. Tonight, what I would like to do is continue this first perek, this first chapter of the Derech Hashem, where he lays out 6 essential pieces of understanding that we need to have about Hashem. We will mention them very briefly, and I'm going to bring up on the screen in a minute. I will screen share the first perek, where I will point out very briefly what these 6 things are. But then we're going to ask a troubling question, and perhaps in answering it, give us hopefully a deeper understanding actually of what Emunah is, and a recipe to some extent of how to achieve it. Okay, so that is, I've set the scene for what hopefully we're going to try and achieve this evening. Now I'm going to screen share. Here we go. And I hope everybody can see that. Right. Let me just possibly make it slightly smaller. I deliberately did it big so that we could see clearly. There we go. Okay, so this is the first perek. Okay, and I've underlined a couple of words. Okay, so he starts off, and this is a section that we did already learn, but we're going to look at it slightly differently. He says, every kol ish mi Yisrael. I'm going from where it says the large aleph, yes? Kol ish mi Yisrael. Every Jew, tzorich sheya'amin v'yeda, needs to believe and know sheyesh shom motzui rishon kadmon v'nitzchi, that there is an entity that is pre-existing, eternal, and it is he, v'hu shehimtzi umamtzi kol ma shenimtza b'mitzias, it is he who brought into existence and continues to bring into existence anything and everything that exists, v'hu ha'eloka baruch hu, and this is Hashem. Very short, lots of stuff in it, but we pointed out, and we spent some time, and I'm not going to redo that. We spoke about the fact that this basic piece of information needs to be accessed, tzorich sheya'amin v'yeda. We spoke about it, the necessity in the eyes of the Ramchal of achieving it, the route to it, coming both through Emunah and Da'as, through, let's give it an oversimplification, through belief and knowledge. Okay? We spoke about why both are needed. We spoke a little bit about the order, and I'm not going to redo that tonight. But tonight I want to point out a really troubling aspect that we encounter as we go further in this chapter. And I'm going to do it very simply for you, because what I've done is we're going to go through a lot of text, but I'm going to just highlight one word at the beginning of each of these subsequent little paragraphs, and we're going to realize that there's something quite strange going on over here. Okay, so we started off with the first piece of knowledge. There are going to be 6 in total. And he does a tiny summary at the end of this first chapter, and we will look at it shortly. There are 6 pieces of information that a Jew needs to be aware of about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, about Hashem. The first and most basic one is that he exists, and it is he that brought everything into existence. Fine. Let's go to base. Let's look at the second one. Base. Oid tzarich sheyeda. Furthermore, one needs to know that this entity, the truth of his essence, exactly what he is, his definition, so to speak, cannot be understood by anybody other than Hashem himself. Okay, and then he goes on a longer paragraph. We're not going to do that now, but notice which word I put in bold over here. Can you see that? Oid tzarich. In this second piece of information, he says, furthermore, one needs to know what's missing. What's missing is the word that he introduced in the first piece of knowledge. Remember, when he spoke about knowing Hashem's existence, he used 2 roots, two methods. You need to believe it and know it. When we move on to him talking about what is called Shleimusai, Hashem's perfection, and that nobody can understand his essence other than him, he doesn't say we need to believe this, he says we need to know this. And the question is, what happened to belief? Why was the belief dropped when it comes to talking about Hashem's perfection? Let's go on. Let's look at the third piece of information. Hechrach metziusai. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu oid tzarich sheyeda. This is the third piece of information about him. Furthermore, you need to know that this entity, Hashem, he is, I'll say it in English and I'll try and explain it. He is the imperative for his own existence. He must exist. Let's put it in simple English. I put that on the poster. He is the only thing that has to exist. We're not going to do the philosophy of it tonight, and Anselm and Plantinga and all the others. We're not going to do the philosophy of it, but from a Torah perspective, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the only thing that has to exist. None of us have to exist. He must exist, and he is the imperative for his own existence. Yes? But what does he say? This is something we need to know. Again, we have that word. You've got to know this. You don't need to believe this, apparently. Let's go on to the fourth piece of information. Furthermore, you need to know that his existence is what is called in philosophical terms non-contingent. He does not depend on anything else. He is where the buck stops. His existence does not depend on anybody or anything else. He is a priori. Nothing comes before him. Okay? And you need to know this. You need to know, number 3, that he creates the need for his own existence. And number 4, says the Ramchal, you need to know that he is not dependent in any way on any other reality. He is the root, he is the source of everything. But notice again, in this fourth piece of information, he says you need to know this. What happened to belief? Okay, let's go on. Number 5. And this is a fascinating one. Again, even the other secular philosophers talk a lot about this simple existence, whatever that means. But Pshitusai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is simple. Now, we need to know what that means. It means that he's not made up of different parts. Let's keep the very simple definition of his simplicity for the moment. We could go much deeper, but we're not going to. He says, Tzarich sheyeda, number 5, you need to know that his existence is a simple existence, without any, sorry, I just want to scroll ahead a bit here. Yes, without any, he's not made up of different parts. It's not complex in that sense that he's made up of different parts. It is one entity. And when we say one, we don't mean one as opposed to two. We mean, because that's coming next, we mean it is one whole, simple entity. Now, Hashem is anything but simple, but it means he's not made up of different parts. Okay, let's leave that for the moment. We're not even going to go into that in depth tonight for a few reasons. But again, what I want to point out, you can see where we're going with this exercise is, what does he say? I've highlighted it here at the beginning. On hey v'chein tzarich sheyeda, we need to know this. What happened to belief? Let's go on to the last one. Yichudai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's uniqueness, not his unity, his uniqueness. There is only one. There can only be one Hashem Echad. There can only be one Hashem. When we talk about Hashem, this is really, really important. It's not semantics or semiotics or any of these other fancy things. But the language you use is really, really important. If somebody says to the way I like to put it, if I may, it's very simple. If you remember this, you'll remember lots of things. You can never put why and Hashem in the same sentence. It's just such a simple thing to remember, right? Because if you're saying why, and admittedly, there are different types of why. I mean, it depends where you're coming from. If you are just trying to understand as much as you can understand, that is legitimate and that's fine. But if the why is, we are holding HaKadosh Baruch Hu to some sort of pre-existing standard against which we can judge him, why did he do the Holocaust? That's not a valid question. Now, again, I don't mean to be provocative tonight. I don't ever mean to be provocative, certainly not for the sake of it. But from a logical perspective, that doesn't mean, of course, the pain, the suffering was immense and of magnitude that's beyond our comprehension. But if there is a genuine question, if a serious thinking scholar wants to say why, then that is actually illogical. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu he is the root and the source of all existence. Now, it is true he does want to have a meaningful relationship with us, but that by definition will have certain limits because we are finite and he is infinite. And therefore, if the why is coming from a perspective as if I have a right or an expectation or an assumption that I have the tools and the right to be able to understand, then that's just simply wrong. And therefore, we can never, maybe just a simple way of remembering it, you can never say that sort of why and Hashem can never go in the same sentence, because then we are just not talking about the same thing. We're talking about a different concept of God that you may or may not have, and that's got nothing to do with Hashem. And as we are told, as we understand who and what, when an Orthodox Jew says the word Hashem, it comes with a whole set of assumptions and understandings, and therefore that sort of why question, which is challenging and is coming from a perspective of an expectation, almost a right to understand, and if I don't, it somehow calls his very existence or his justice or his charity or his beneficence or his capability into question, then as far as we're concerned, it's not that we don't have the answer, which we don't, but it means that the question is not logically valid. Because if you've understood what we mean, if we are talking the same language, and when we say the word Hashem, this is what we mean, then by definition, that question is invalid. Let me just give you one more very brief way of looking at this, which is a certain illogicality sometimes you might come across. And it's interesting to note that it is often found when people are challenged emotionally and maybe even legitimately. Let's take the Holocaust for a second. So imagine an atheist would say to you, I will prove to you there is no God, because how possibly could an all-knowing, all-capable, all-merciful God, how can those three things fit together? And therefore, ergo, there is no God. Let's just break that down. Let's leave aside the emotions, which of course are valid and do not in any way diminish. Those are real issues, and Judaism has a way of addressing them, and we address these emotional issues with sensitivity and with tremendous emotion. But if this is to be used as apparently as a logical argument, then we totally do not accept that. And here's the way that one can respond. I'm not suggesting you should. Often it's inappropriate, because often it means a person is in pain and it's not appropriate, etc. But purely logically, hold on a second, Mr. Atheist. Let's just look at this. Until you came across the Holocaust, right, or something similar, you were quite happy to live your life blithely under the illusion or delusion, depending on your perspective, that Hashem doesn't exist. You are the architect of your own destiny, your own fate. You run your own life, your career, your whatever it is. Then what happens? You are shaken. Your world is shaken because you encounter something for which you have no explanation or understanding. You have to surrender. You give up. You say, this is immense. This is something I cannot understand. You then have the chutzpah to slap a label on it and call it God, and then have the chutzpah to have an expectation of wanting to understand it. Well, hold on a second. Let's just analyze that. Let's just analyze that process. What have you done? You've come across something which you do not understand and cannot understand. You sense it is beyond you. It's massive. It's immense. So it's a big fat label called I don't have a clue. But instead of having the honesty to say, this is something which I don't have a clue, instead you cross out that label and you write on it God. And then you have the temerity to demand and to expect to be able to understand it. No, you only put that label on it because you couldn't understand, because anything you can understand, you're quite happy to say it's you, you're in charge. So you've just moved one label for another. That's all you've really done. So therefore, logically, now that doesn't mean that the question isn't necessarily valid per se, but it means that your challenge and where you're coming from intellectually has no validity. And this is just something that we need to bear in mind, at least for ourselves. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have to learn and understand a Jewish approach to suffering and all these things. Of course we do. And there are many, many and very sophisticated, and maybe we'll do this sometime. Depends how far we get in the Derech Hashem. Absolutely, it's a massive topic. It's one of the biggest topics, but we'll do it our way, not by being challenged. Anyway, so I just threw that in. So this is Hashem's yichudai. We're talking about Hashem's uniqueness. He is unique. There can be no other, there can't be a second all-powerful being by definition. But this is something, again, this is the last of the 6 pieces of knowledge that a Jew needs to have to complete their understanding of Hashem. This is number 6. And again, he says, you have to know this. Again, he's dropped the whole concept of yamin, of believing. Look at the very end. We'll finish this off, and then we'll get to try and start explaining maybe an approach, or answer might be a bit too facetious. We'll see. Zion. Nimtzo klal yediyos hashroshios ha'ele sheish. And with this, he closes the first chapter. We are in subsequent weeks going to have to go back and look at each of these again in detail. But he says, therefore, we have, to summarize, here's his plenary session on chapter 1. We have therefore encountered 6 categories of pieces of information we need to know about Hashem, and they are Amitas Mitziyusay Yisbarach, that he exists. Interesting, he says Amitas Mitziyusay, the truth of that he exists. Maybe we'll come back to that. Shleimusay, his wholeness and completeness. Hechrach Himotzay, that he must exist. And Hayosay Bilti Nitla Bezulasay, that he is non-contingent, his existence does not depend on anybody or anything else. Pushitusay, his simplicity, so to speak, Yichudai, and his uniqueness. And with that, he closes the chapter. And I will now stop the screen share because I think we've done enough to be able, I have demonstrated, I hope, the question that we have. So this is the question, and this is what we want to look at tonight. Now, in order to do this, I am going to use some ideas both from Reb Moshe Shapiro, Zechon Livracha, and Reb Shlomo Wolbe. Okay, now these may be a little bit challenging, so I hope I managed to get these across clearly. We'll try our best. Here we go. Let us first give for ourselves, the journey that we want to take tonight, and the destination rather, is to redefine the Emunah relationship. Okay, where we want to arrive at is that Emunah, in this sense, now the word Emunah is used throughout the Chumash and Tanakh in other senses as well, to believe, to trust. And of course, there are aspects of that are relevant here, but specifically when we talk about the mitzvah of Emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that he exists, it takes on a whole different layer and level of meaning. It goes way beyond and much deeper than anything else. The Chazon Ish used to use the language, he spoke about it as a spiritual muscle. And we're going to try and, which is a very beautiful explanation. It's a spiritual muscle which needs to be exercised. And we're going to try and give that some color and some meaning. What it is, Emunah, is the awareness of a vibrant connection and relationship between every Jew and Hashem. That's what Emunah is. I'll say that again. What Emunah really is a kesher, a connection, a living, deep relationship and connection between Hashem and every Jew. We were zoicha to it. We merited it. It became fixed, as it were, inside of us at Matan Torah. When our life support, quite literally, was suspended temporarily, we disconnected from one way and level of connecting to source, and we were plugged in again at a much deeper level. And that connection, got to give the game away, I suppose. From that moment on, and with those words, it was simultaneous. Anochi Hashem Elokecha was a statement of fact. It wasn't even it is a commandment. It now becomes a commandment for us. Here's the difficulty. Let me put it to you this way. You know, the Kabbalists tell us that the 10 utterances with which Hashem created the world, which are 10 degrees of revelation, if you like, they were initially slowly concealed by the spiritual impurity and contamination and blockages that happened in Mitzrayim. They were then revealed in reverse order through the 10 plagues, the Esemakos. This is a well-known Kabbalistic idea, so that if you knew how to, I'll give you one example. So for example, the second utterance with which Hashem created the world is Yehi Or, let there be light. So the penultimate, the 9th makkah is choshech, is darkness. They are a penumbra, right? It's like peeling back layers. So Hashem uses 10 different utterances. When we talk about Hashem speaking, the concept of Hashem speaking means it's the concept of revelation. It's a form of revelation, as the Ramban says at the beginning of Bereshis. The Mitzrayim then endeavored through their tumah, through their spiritual contamination, to block those channels and pathways of awareness. The 10 makkos then revealed them once again, and therefore they do connect. Then we're back to so-called to the equilibrium, and then the 10 ma'amoros with which Hashem created the world morph into the Aseres Hadibros, where we go from baseline to being 10 levels up. Okay, it's a very general overview of an important Kabbalistic insight. And therefore, we find the very interesting thing. The Gemara asks the following question. Says the Gemara, hold on a second. When I count the utterances with which Hashem created the world, I only find 9, asks the Gemara. Only 9 times does it say Vayomer. And the Gemara answers the following. Bereshis nami ma'amarhu, says the Gemara. The posuk Bereshis itself is an utterance. But it doesn't say Vayomer Hashem like the others. So it's a statement without us being told that it is a statement. And I'm going to digress for 30 seconds because I have to. It's amazing. The posuk says in Tehillim, La'olam Hashem dvorcha nitzav b'shamayim. Your word, Hashem, stands forever in the firmaments, in the shamayim. And if you know a little bit about science, we'll know that Penzias and Wilson won the Nobel Prize for uncovering the CMBR, as it's known, the cosmic microwave background radiation, which is this 3 kilocycle hum, which can be heard. You can go on the internet, you can hear it. It is the sound wave from that moment. It's the Dvar Hashem, because it's there forever. That's exactly what David HaMelech meant. La'olam Hashem dvarcha nitzav b'shamayim. It's there, it's reverberating. Baruch she'omar v'hoyo ha'olam. It's got to be there, and therefore its physical echo can actually still be there. For this, they won the Nobel Prize. One of them actually was a relatively Orthodox Jew, by the way. But anyway, that's to digress. So this Bereshis is a ma'amar. So here we have the very first utterance of creation, Bereshis, but we're not told it's a ma'amar. And this corresponds to the first of the 10 commandments, which is a commandment, but it's also just a statement. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. That's the parallel. They parallel each other. One was the statement through which physical existence came into being, and the other is its parallel in the world of the spirit. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. And it is with those words Hashem revived us and plugged us into a deeper power pack, which is Hashem himself. The Zohar HaKadosh says, the Gemara says, Anochi is an acronym. And Oni, Nafshi, Kasvis, Yehovis. I, my soul, I wrote down and I gave it. Says Hashem, I put, so to speak, some of myself into the word of Hashem is captured in the Torah, but it is also captured inside each of us. And that is what happened at the moment of Matan Torah. And therefore it's a statement of reality. So how does it then become a commandment? Let's explore this. So we need to try and understand that Emunah, on the one hand, is, as I said, the definition is, it is the truth of the living, breathing, dynamic relationship that we have with Hashem. And here, again, I totally give the game away. I was going to build it up, but I think I've given it away to those of you that are focusing here. It exists. We just need to uncover it. We are ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. That's who we are. Chazal say we are ma'aminim. We are believers. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean we're gullible? Jews are anything but gullible. We are am kashei oref. We don't buy anything from anybody. We are the most cynical, we are the most, knocking my laptop here. We are the most cynical, fractious, argumentative people you will ever know. We don't accept anything from anybody. We have that resilience. We know that. So what does it mean we are ma'aminim? You know what it means? It actually means that relationship lives within us by virtue of our neshama. We need to uncover it. That's the avodah. That's the tzivui. That is the commandment. It's both a statement of fact, a statement of reality, but there is also avodah involved. I've given you the chapter heading now. Let's elaborate on this just a little bit. And here we need to talk our terminology a little bit. We talk about, there are two words that we use, emes and emunah. Now they are not one and the same thing. There is emes and there is emunah. Let's explain what that means. Emes is, of course, the translation of emes is truth. This mistake that people think that if you have emunah, therefore, if I believe, therefore the existence of Hashem it becomes an emes for me, as if somehow that is emes. And that is simply not true. I'll give you an example. I'll give you a very simple example. Let's say, if I were to ask you, is it emes that 2 and 2 is 4? You would say to me, yes. That is emes. But so would that therefore be in the same category as somebody who is now convinced that Hashem exists? So however he arrived at that conclusion. So it's emes to this person that Hashem exists because he has emunah in Hashem. Let's say he manages to achieve belief in Hashem, or he thinks he does. And that's another whole, this should be also opening up some avenues of thought to you. It is possible for somebody to delude themselves into thinking that they have tapped into the source of emunah that actually lives within us, and they can actually be deluding themselves. It is possible. So a person might think, well, I believe in Hashem, and therefore now this becomes my emes. This becomes my truth because I'm convinced of this, in the same way that I'm convinced that 2 and 2 is 4. So I have two different types of emes. Now, of course, 2 and 2 is 4 is less important to me. That piece of emes is less important to me than the emes that Hashem exists. But fundamentally, they now are put in the same category, if you like, of emes. If a person thinks that, boy, are they mistaken. Let's understand. Emunah brings us to the same place that Seichel would bring us to a fullness of emes. But here's the difference. It is a type of emes. Emunah is above emes. This is what we need to really try and understand. If somebody has real emunah, and we'll go on to define it a little bit clearer. that is way beyond something that they may have managed to demonstrate and prove evidentially, empirically, whatever you want. But 2 and 2 is 4, it's emes. Let's say somebody is convinced that Hashem also exists. You can be convinced that Hashem exists and not have emunah. Let's put it that way, let's be cheeky. Your seichel alone can never take you. It might help you a little bit along the journey to some extent, but seichel alone is never, cannot, and I'll explain why and how in a minute, cannot take you to the place where we need to get to if the destination is emunah. Why? Because emunah is not below seichel, emunah is above seichel. That doesn't mean it's foolish, not at all. And we'll give some explanation. When we talk about emes generally, it is something that we prove using our seichel, or we use certain postulates or certain things that we accept as being true, and we build on them, and we arrive at a conclusion, which then to us is emes. But emunah can never be built that way, and that is because for 2 reasons. Number one is it is actually utterly impossible to prove, to demonstrate using proper seichel, and I know this is controversial, but I'm going to say this anyway. There are various so-called proofs of Hashem, whether they are ontological or teleological or cosmological or whatever, the argument from design, all sorts of different. The bottom line is that they may be useful. Some of them may have certain philosophical validities, and the Torah may even acknowledge some of them, but do not think for a second that they can be therefore used to demonstrate conclusively that HaKadosh Baruch Hu exists, because there is no proof. There cannot be a proof, because if there could be a proof, there would be no Bechira. Not proof in the absolute sense. And remember, the word proof is an important one, because it's used. Proof is actually a continuum. In maths, proof means 100%. In critical theory, or in sociology, the word proof means something very, very different. Or even in economics, the dismal science, it means something else. Proof is a continuum. And if you look at proof and you think that you're going to use one of these fancy ideas of deductive, inductive, whatever it is, to prove that there has to be a God, and that's going to be absolute and cast iron, you're very mistaken. It's not possible. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is above proof by definition. Number one, that's the first mistake. But the second mistake, I think, is worse. The second mistake is because if you arrive, listen carefully, because this is, I believe this is what I was makabel from my rebbes, and this is very, very deep. I hope I managed to explain this carefully and clearly. If your belief in Hashem is based on you're accepting of some sort of balance of probabilities logic that Ma'amad Har Sinai is true, right? Rabbi Professor Dr. David Gottlieb has written a wonderful book, Reason to Believe. He recently reissued it a couple of years ago, and he was a professor of maths and philosophy at Johns Hopkins. He's a Boston Chassid, very well known. You can look him up on the internet, and he's a serious scholar, and he's written a book to demonstrate that the probability that Ma'amad Har Sinai really happened is very high. It's pretty high. And Rabbi Lawrence Kellerman's also done a lot of stuff on that, and you can buy their wonderful books, Permission to Believe, Permission to Receive, etc., etc. And they are great. They are very good. But if you think that as a result of these, you are therefore, you read them, you're a scholar, you read them very carefully, and you say, you know what, I am convinced. On balance of probabilities, Hashem, it looks like he exists. Do not mistake that for a second and think that that is Emunah. And with that, you've been Mekayim the mitzvah of Emunah. No way. Emunah is above and beyond that. So now let's start explaining, what is this? What is the avodah of Emunah? Emunah, if you will listen carefully to what I said before, Emunah is something that will emanate. First of all, it exists within you. That's the first point. It actually is your life source. At Matan Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us back a new, call it a neshama if you like. And how did he do it? He did it with the words, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, the very commandment is the statement of your new reality, your source of life. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. You are born again. Sorry. Literally. And the Gemara says with that, nitku divrei Torah belibam, they were fixed into our hearts. It's within. What a Jew needs to do is to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu and recognize him as the source of who you are. If you start looking for Hashem outside of you, you've messed up. You'll never find him. And if you do, it won't be Emunah, because Emunah is understanding, is having the deepest form of self-awareness in terms of your own shoresh, your own root. Who are you? You are your neshama. What is your neshama? Your neshama is a ruchniistic connection to the source to Hashem himself. And that is your life. That is the source of your life. That's why you and how you are living and breathing. Discover it, uncover it. That is Emunah, that yachas, that relationship, that shoresh, that kesher, that is what Emunah is. And to the extent that you manage successfully to discover and uncover that which is actually you and inside of you, that is Emunah. How do you know that you exist? This is something philosophers have spoken about, the so-called, the famous, it goes back a long time, the brain in a vat experiment. And how do you know you're not living in some sort of matrix, if you know what that film is, the matrix type wild scenario? What is the real answer to that question? And it's not, I shop, therefore I am, sorry. It's not Descartes, it's none of that stuff. Do you know what it is? It's something called das. You know. Do you have any real doubt? And let's, without going into Bishop Berkeley and all this other stuff, when they worried about whether they really did or didn't exist, whether they were just figments of their own or others' imaginations. These are very nice philosophical exercises. But does any sane, or should any sane, rational person have any real doubt as to whether they actually exist? If you do, I'm afraid you need Prozac and a straitjacket and I don't know what. We intuitively know, and we don't have any real doubt. To the extent that you don't have and shouldn't have any real doubt about your own existence, that is exactly the same type and level of knowledge that you should have, that who you are at root and at source is nothing other than an extension and a connection and a neshama, which is a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is you. That is Emunah. That's a journey into yourself. Hillel, who was the biggest onov, Hillel would stand in the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash on Yom Tov, and he would say, Im ani kan, hakoil kan. If I am here, all is here. And ani is a reference to the Shekhinah. You need to know in Kabbalah, the word ani is a reference to the Shekhinah. Why is the word ani a reference to Hashem's divine presence? It's the midas, the sphere of Malchus is ani. Why? Because he was because of his humility. You'll now begin to appreciate this, the subtlety. Hillel, because of his anova, his lack of ego and bias, similar to Avraham Avinu, he realized that this was his ani, this is who he is. The ani was not an ego. The ani was a recognition, a journey into the center of soul, of self, and a recognition that at my root, I am a manifestation of Malchus, of Shekhinah, of Hashem. David HaMelech says, Va'ani tefillah. That is who I am. Va'ani tefillah. Chana is medaberes al liba. That's where we get the Amida from. She speaks to her heart, to her soul. And therefore it's quiet. It doesn't need to be expressed. It's silent. It's deep. It doesn't need expressing outwards, as it were. It is wrestling with all the outer layers that obscure and obfuscate and confuse who we are. And instead, 3 times a day, we are challenged to stand still with our hearts upwards and our face downwards, and close our eyes and journey into ourselves to recognize and to realize the Hashem that is within. And to the extent that we manage to do that, we achieve Emunah. And this is not just, do not mistake this for fluffy emotions, important though they might be. It is way deeper than that. That is the avodah. Now we can understand why it is both a statement and a commandment. Brilliant. It's not my Torah. Moshe Shapiro, Shlomo Wolber, they are explaining the Chazon Ish, but all the pieces fit together. To me, this was the most, this is a different sort of MS. This is not an MS that you can sit and work out some sort of philosophical proof about whether Hashem's existence is contingent and not deontological, whatever. This is way, way beyond that and deeper than that. This is having a deep conviction and a connection. And this is the other thing. It's a relationship. It's a relationship.
Can I ask something?
Sure.
Or did you want to go on? Because I don't want to interrupt you.
It's okay. I tend, it's fine. Go ahead. I'm listening.
Okay. Sure. You were saying in the beginning that, and now again, that Emunah sort of is something like the connection between Hashem and every Ben V'Bat Israel. So that would imply a conception of truth that is not an opposite to Emunah, but which would come afore actually in every single Jew's
it is yes
thing or something like that. So yeah. My question was now if that is, because we've been sort of speaking now on the level of individuals, right? Or that was my impression.
Yeah.
But then there is collective reasoning or communal reasoning that is in the present, that is sort of, how do I say that?
Well, the mitzvah.
I'm saying that
of Emunah, and mitzvah, and the mitzvah and the avodah of Emunah is a personal one. It's not a collective mitzvah.
Yes, but the concept of truth that this Emunah implies would be not individual. Do you know what I mean?
No, I don't. I'd have to think about that. I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. And
okay, I'll write you later.
With pleasure. I'm not trying to be difficult or dim. I genuinely don't understand. I don't understand your point, but write it to me, and I'm more than happy to.
It's not that. Also, not the most.
No problem. With pleasure. With pleasure.
Okay.
So let's try and take this idea now. I hope I've managed to lay the idea out, and it needs reflection. It definitely needs working on. But now we can understand, perhaps, and answer the question that we started with. The only time that the Ramchal uses the word Ya'amin is when it comes to the existence of Hashem. There he uses, there is a need for das. And by the way, this explains also very beautifully. The starting point is Ya'amin. If you don't get this, this is where we have to do this avodah of Emunah to arrive at a das that emanates from the Emunah. But that is only relevant when we talk about the existence of Hashem. The subsequent clarifications within this, that, by the way, and we'll talk about maybe next week, can be evidenced and looked at from more philosophically, that he isn't what he is, there aren't two of him, and that he is perfect, and that, etc., that he is the imperative for his own existence. That's already at a different level. These are details within, and those tzarich sheyeda, yeda. And he'll show us how those can be potentially arrived at through knowledge, but Emunah, this very subtle concept of Emunah relates to one thing and one thing only: the conviction, but the conviction that is from a self-awareness that inside of me, or even deeper, who I actually am, is, as it were, a shtick, a part of Hashem, as it were. That applies, so it only applies, that's why he says only at the beginning, that he exists. That comes about from this avodah, as we've explained, this avodah of Emunah. The subsequent bits, which are important, a Jew has to know them, but they do not come from this Emunah, that he is only one, and that he is the imperative for his own existence, and all this other sort of stuff. Those are achieved. Those are details within. Once I know that this is who I am, and that he exists, and that he is, so to speak, within me, that is achieved through Emunah, and also Das. But that is, Emunah is an incredibly important part of that. But then the work of Emunah, in that respect, is over. The ongoing work of Emunah is to maintain that awareness. Shivisi Hashem lenegdi somid. David HaMelech says, I place Hashem in front of me constantly. He accompanies me. Baruch atah Hashem. Whenever we say atah, that is Emunah. Knowing that he's there, he's right there. That it's relationship. It's real. It's not just that. In other words, I know that I exist, but I know that he is existence. Maybe that's a slightly more sophisticated way of putting it. I know with absolute conviction that I exist within reality. I exist. And it is that same knowledge, that deep knowledge of Emunah, that I know that he is existence itself. Because my existence is based on having him as my essence. The later philosophical work, or the other work of da'as that needs to be done in understanding that he is one, and all these other bits, these other 6 bits, that is not part of Emunah. That is a different level of avodah. But notice the order. And with this, I think we'll finish this evening. Notice the order. The order is significant and instructive. First, the first thing is to achieve Emunah. Emunah, to reiterate, is way beyond where Seichel can take you. Seichel may help you part of the way along. There's no question about it. But the destination, let's be clear, the destination is the conviction at a very elemental level, way beyond even beyond emotion. The absolute rock solid conviction, in the same way that I know that I exist, to that level. If I exist, well, who am I and what am I? I am the neshama that is within me. And that is who I am. And therefore there is that dynamic relationship by virtue of the fact that I, as a Jew with a neshama, am alive. And it is discovering and uncovering that journey within self to uncover that. To leave you with something practical, helps us with this, I would say, first and foremost, it's tefillah and it's brachas. And when they are said correctly, and when we think about them, then that is a very a surefire route to being able. Remember, you're not trying to superimpose something externally. That's not the avodah. The avodah is actually to dig within ourselves to discover that, because we are ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. That's the pathway, and I will leave you with that thought. Hannah, happy to receive your emails. We could talk maybe later with pleasure. Thank you for joining me this evening, and we will move on in Mitzvah Hashem next week. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Nice to see you. Be well. Good night.
Bye.